lost at the fall, running away when I'd hear you call. Father, you worked your will. I had no righteousness of my own. I had no right to draw near your throne. Father, you loved me still. And in love before you laid the world's foundation, you predestined to adopt me as your own. You have raised me so high above my station. I'm a child of God by grace and grace alone. You left your home to seek out the lost. You knew the great and terrible cost. But Jesus, your face was set. I worked my fingers down to the bone, but nothing I did could ever atone. But Jesus, you paid my debt. By your blood I have redemption and salvation. Lord, you died that I might reap what you have sown. And you rose that I might be a new creation. I am born again by grace and grace alone. I was in darkness all of my life. I never knew the day from the night. But Spirit, you made me see. And I swore I knew the way on my own. A head full of rocks, a heart made of stone. But Spirit, you moved in me. And at your touch my sleeping spirit was awakened. On my darkened heart the light of Christ has shone. Called into a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Heaven's citizen by grace and grace alone. So I stand in faith by grace and grace alone. I will run the race by grace and grace alone. I will slay my sins by
Look at the banding. 4.
feel the beat, the groove.
I should have written like a big 4 on my hand.
The timer restarted. That's okay.
Okay, we got this.
Good morning, and welcome to Form 12E2. We're so happy you're here. We're getting ready to start our service, so please find your seats. On that seat, you're going to find a connection card that looks a little bit like this. Please fill out that connection card with your name, phone number, school, grade level, and whether or not it's your first time. Here at Form 12E2, we encourage you guys to ask questions. And on the back side of your connection card, we have a place to do just that. If you have any questions during our talk about what we're talking about or who Jesus is, please, we encourage you to write it down. At the end of our talk today, you can take your connection card and place it in the box over by the double doors leading into our Deep Roots Cafe. If you brought a friend or it's your first time, we would love to get you guys a smoothie, a hot chocolate, or a coffee from our Deep Roots Cafe. We also have youth group every Wednesday night from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, where we get to hang out, learn about Jesus, and have a small group time where we get to have deeper conversations about the lesson that night or about Jesus himself, and we would love to see you there. We also use something called the Remind to keep you guys up to date with what's going on in the youth group, the church, or upcoming events. If you would like to sign up to Remind, you can text @12E2 to this number right here. We're getting ready to begin our service, so please stand as we enter into a time of worship. All right, go ahead and stand up. Before we begin, you might notice we're missing Miss Caitlin Dean. She is currently doing her show for Fiddler on the Roof
Fiddler on the Roof, and so they called in B Team, which is me. Not them, they're great. Me. I'm B Team. So we're going to do 2 songs today, and if we mess up, just be like, hey, joyful noise. They're doing great. Go Noah. All right.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. You came along, put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Not afraid to show you my weakness, failures and flaws, but you've seen them all. Still call me friend. God of the mountain, God of the valley. There's not a place your great your afflictions are for me. Oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us. How he loves us so. He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his winds and mercy. When all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. Oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. His portion, and he is our prize. Drawn to redemption by the grace in his eyes. Grace is an ocean, we are lost sinking. Heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss, and my heart turns violently inside my chest. I don't want I think about the way that he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. He loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Dear God, I thank you for letting us all come here, and I pray that Noah gets the message out and that we can learn more about you. Amen.
So you'll never guess what I did not do today. I do not have a microphone on. So I'm going to stand here while Matt gets it. And I'm just going to do, my intro little spiel when I just small talk it while Matt gets it. So anyways, hey, welcome to Forum 12v2. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Oh, thank you for taking that. Nah, you can take that. Thank you. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I see half of you guys forgot, which is fine because I was nervous. Look, full disclosure, I was assuming you all were going to remember it. And then today I was going to show up not wearing green, and you guys were going to continuously pinch me and make fun of me. So I laid out my shirt that I was going to wear last night super excited, and then have you guys forget anyways. So anyways, thank you so much. This is tangled. So while Matt untangles it, I just want to share some sad Chargers news. You know, you guys know that I'm a big Chargers fan. We released Keenan Allen this week, who has been on the team since 2013, since I was a wee lad. Get it? Because St. Patrick. Anyways, I'm so sorry. So we got rid of Keenan Allen this week, and we got rid of Mike Williams. So I'm sad, and you know. Anyways, yeah. So that's that. Let me give this. I'm just gonna hold my ear while Matt finds. Yes, while Matt finds face tape. Huh? Protective yeah, let's start. Oh, you're gonna masking tape? Is there face tape in there? Typically, this is not an issue, but you know, Noah got so caught up and chatting with you guys. All right. Okay. Welcome to youth. All right, look. I need all of your honest opinions. Is this stylish? Sounds like a split room, so we're just gonna roll with it. Hey, you know what? Sometimes that's what happens. What'd you say? So, anyways, cool. I just want to say Adam messed me up on Graves in the Garden. So you're like, no, why'd you mess that part up? I was staring right into Adam's soul, and he made me mess up. Anyways, all right, hey, well, welcome back to Luke. This is week 8. So last week we looked at Jesus giving us freedom from sin. And it's not that he makes it so that we don't sin anymore, but that we don't have to carry the burden of sin around, and that he gives us grace, and that burden of sin isn't weighing on us every single week. And this week we're going to be talking about traditions. Right? And everyone's got their own traditions. You probably have some that just you'd have. Your family might have some of how you do certain things. And one of the traditions like we have in the youth group is every Thanksgiving we go out and we do the turkey bowl, where we just play flag football for like 3 hours and have a lot of fun. One tradition that my dad always had is on Christmas morning, he wouldn't go downstairs to open gifts in his pajamas. He would get fully ready for the day. So like if we'd open gifts at 7, 6 o'clock, he's waking up to shower and get ready. And he'd go downstairs and he's in his Sunday outfit, 7 a.m. in the morning. And so my family, we'd all be together and we'd be in our pajamas and it'd just be my dad in his nice Christmas outfit. Or like rugby. Rugby has a ton of traditions, and one of them that is well known is something called shoot the boot. So basically, what happens is when you join a rugby team and you have not scored yet, it's great, you know. But once you score your first try, or like a touchdown, you have to take part in this tradition called shoot the boot. So what you do is you look at your team and you find the biggest, sweatiest, nastiest guy, and then you take his shoe, you take his cleat that he's worn the entire game. This is done at the end of the game. You take his shoe that he's been wearing for the entire game that has like dirt and sweat and whatever else happens in a rugby game inside of it, and then you fill it with water. And then you give it to the other person, and the entire team crowds around you as we chant, shoot the boot, and then you have to drink the water out of the shoe or the boot. I have done it, and it tastes just as great as you think it tastes. Or like another tradition that I had when I was playing rugby that it was just a me thing is if I found a coin on the field, whether we were playing or warming up, I'd put it in my sock, and then towards the end of the game, I would just have like a penny rolling around the bottom of my sock. It was actually kind of funny. But we have traditions. It's a normal thing that we have in the world, in our personal lives, in our families, and everything like that. But also down in biblical times, they had a ton of traditions too. And there were these different traditions that they had in faith before Jesus was around that they had to follow because it was the law. It was things that they had to do. And so there was a lot of things like they had a lot of oral traditions where like you would pass down the word by speaking it. So where we have a Bible and we can read it, there would be people who would memorize these scrolls. They would go out and they would speak it. You had to memorize different parts of the text to be able to recite them and different things like that. It was also required to do certain things like fasting, where you wouldn't be able to eat. So you'd be allowed to eat before the sun was up, and you could not eat again until the sun was down. And so if you've heard of something called Ramadan, that's a type of fasting they do. It's they're allowed to eat when the sun is not in the sky. But that was a law that they had to follow. Or Sabbath, there were certain laws of what you were allowed to do and what you were not allowed to do on a Sunday. So you could go to the synagogue or church, and then outside of that, you could do nothing that was considered work in any way until the sun went back down. So if you remembered, 2 weeks ago, we talked about Jesus. He healed Simon's mother-in-law, and he was teaching in the synagogue. And then at the end of the passage, Jesus goes and he heals all of these people. That's because the sun went down, Sabbath was technically over, so people can now come and get healing because healing was a form of work. Or even the tradition of having to sacrifice animals to atone for their sins. And so it's this requirement that they all had to follow. But then we have this man named Jesus. He comes along and he frees us from these traditions. And so this is going to be your first fill in the blank. Very top, title, Freedom from Tradition. Freedom from tradition. And I want to be clear what today is about, all right? Everything we've talked about, like in the past, we just finished our Wednesday series of What's in It for Me, looking at different spiritual disciplines. How can we grow closer to God? We talk about Sabbath, like we encourage you guys, hey, rest on a Sunday if you can, right? We encourage you guys to do certain things. And while we still do those things, right, people still fast, people still observe the Sabbath, they are not required. Right? People still fast for certain things. People here have fasted. I know friends who are in churches, they still fast. We still observe the Sabbath of taking a day of rest. Because Jesus came not to get rid of these altogether so that we don't have to do them anymore. He came to fulfill them so that we can still do them at our own leisure for the right reasons, not because we're forced to. And in fact, Matthew 5:17 says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." And so Jesus breaks this tradition because he takes this thing that is a law and something that everyone at this time were forced to do. And he makes it so that they get to do it for the joy of being closer to God and not because they have to out of requirement. He takes this tradition and moves it from a I have to into a I get to. He removes and says that you don't have to fast, but now you get to. I'm not going to force you to do these things, but I want you to do it because you want a relationship with me. And like I said earlier, we still observe these traditions, but they're not required in any way. The way that I think about this is like someone who's playing sports or band or fill in the blank, whatever you want. You have your practice, right? What you do, you have your sport. That's how you learn how to play the sport. But outside of that, it's really what you want to do. If you want to work out, you're welcome to. If you want to do extra running on your own, you're welcome to. If you want to do skills, go for it. If you want to get better at that sport, these are things you should do. But I'm not going to force you to do any of that stuff. If you just want to show up to practice, that's all okay. But if you want to get closer and you want to get better at this sport, you want to get closer to that level of athleticism that you want to be at, here are the things that you can do. Here are the things that you should do. And the same thing is being applied here. You don't have to do these traditions in order to be a Christian. You don't have to do these things in order to make it to heaven. But these are things that we should take part because if we want to truly experience the joy of God, we should be able to want to spend time with him and focus entirely on him. And I know I keep saying this, but I want to make it clear. This is not a requirement of our faith, but it's something we should do to grow our relationship with Jesus. And so we're going to jump into Luke chapter 5 and start with verses 33 all the way through 38. Jesus questioned about fasting. They, the Pharisees, said to him, "John's disciples often fast and pray, and so do the disciples of the Pharisees, but yours go on eating and drinking." Jesus answered, "Can you make the friends of the bridegroom fast while he is with them? But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them. In those days, they will fast." He told them this parable, "No one tears out a piece of an old garment to patch an old one. Otherwise, they will have torn the new garment, and patch from the new will not match the old. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins. The wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins." So remember, at this point in Jesus' ministry, the Pharisees are following around. They are doing all that they can to find Jesus trip up. They're trying to find a way to prove that this man isn't who he says. They're trying to find a way to disprove Jesus as a teacher so that they can get back into religious power. The Pharisees don't like how happy Jesus is while he's breaking these sacred laws that they've followed for years and years. And they actually use John the Baptist, the man who baptized Jesus, his ministry against him. And while there's nothing wrong with the way that John the Baptist was doing his ministry, Jesus throws this parable at him, which is nothing new for Jesus, right? We've talked a lot about the parables of Jesus and why he's done all that stuff. But he does this so it's easier for people to understand. And so he uses this parable of like a bridegroom or a wedding. And basically, during this time, they had this belief where if you were at a wedding ceremony and you were enjoying it, you're having fun, there was joy of everything about celebrating this marriage. And if there was a ritual, a religious ritual or a tradition that was going on at the time that would take any joy or happiness away from it, then you didn't have to observe it. So say you were fasting and the wedding was in the middle of the day. If because that I can't eat is going to take away from the joy of the ceremony, then you don't have to observe it for that portion of the ceremony. And so you were allowed to break that tradition in order to enjoy the ceremony for all that it's worth. And so here, Jesus is saying, if there's a ritual that you're doing because you feel like you have to, it's taking away from the relationship and the joy that you get to have a relationship with me. And I don't want you to follow that ritual. Because if there's this tradition that you're doing that's getting in the way and acting as a barrier between yours and mine relationship, then I don't want you to do it. I want you to focus on our relationship first, and we can get to it later. And like we said earlier, this is talking about traditions. And so what this isn't saying is saying, well, okay, what I want to do is I want to do something that's a sin. And so God wants me to remove that barrier. So I'm just going to sin, focus on my relationship, continue to sin, and then, I'll figure it out later. We are called to sin no more. And so this portion doesn't apply to sin in any way, but focus specifically on those traditions. And this applies to all those traditions that people are doing in order to get closer to Jesus. And sometimes they can feel like it's I have to instead of I get to. And so Jesus, being the way Jesus is, gives this fantastic parable. He says, if someone has these old clothes, and they're going to repair these old clothes, so they go out and they buy a new set, and then they cut up that new set to patch the old, that doesn't make any sense. Or if you take this old wine skin, which is where they had put their wine or their drinks or anything like that, and it's falling apart, and then you take new wine and put it in there, because of all the gases and everything, the fermenting of the wine would actually break that wineskin. That doesn't make any sense. Just put it in a new one. And like, for example, right, let's say I took this paper here, and I wanted to write a sign on it, right? Sometimes we'll do worship across the way, so I'll write signs that says, hey, just so you're aware, we're doing worship over there, then we'll come back all together. So I wanted to write a sign, right? And this is my piece of paper. But this piece of paper is just messed up, right? It was crumpled, it was dirty, just imagine there's dirt, but it's like all messed up, and then in it there's some it's torn in some places, and I was like, oh man, this is the paper I really wanted to use, and it was all messed up. I was like, oh, you know what? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a new piece of paper, and I'm just going to cut some patches up, and so I'll just cut a little corner here. All the people who know scissor safety are freaking out at the moment because I'm cutting towards my hand. But I was like, I'm just going to, get some patches. Yeah, that's fine. And then I'm just going to tape them on there. Oh, my tape. Come on. Boop. Oh. Yeah, that works. That's fine. We're just going to patch it up. Patch it up. There we go. You didn't know you get an arts and crafts show today, did you, huh? Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Who is he? I don't know. Sorry. All right. We patched it up. There it is. Good as new. Arts and crafts, huh? Now we are ready for a sign. Now, understandably, if this is what I wrote a sign on, every single one of you would be like, we need a new youth pastor because this guy is out of his mind. because this doesn't make any sense. This is so backwards. Why would you ruin this other piece of paper to fix this old one? Just use the new one. Why are we going to try and fix something that is very clearly broken? And that's what Jesus is saying here. He's saying you're trying to fix something that is very clearly broken. It's hurting the relationship that we have, and so I've come to give you a whole new way to do this. Why are you going to try and patch up this thing that hasn't worked for generations and generations? The whole Old Testament that we look at is a system that is broken. And if you know anything about the Old Testament, you know the Israelites fail again and again and again and again and again and again. Did I mention again? Over and over and over again, they fail this system. And so God says, you know what? We're going to get rid of that. I'm not going to come to fix it. I'm going to give you something new. Those traditions that you have are obviously not working, so I'm going to go and I'm going to give you a whole new system, brand new. I haven't come to patch your clothes, but I brought you a whole new set for you to put on and be reborn in me. And this is what Jesus aims to do in our lives when we have these sinful traditions and what we want to do and take part in the world. He says, I have this new set of clothes for you, and I want you to put it on. I'm not here to fix your life, but give you a whole new set of clothes to make it reborn. And 2 Corinthians 5:16 through 19 says, so from now on we regard no one from a worldly point of view. Though once we regarded Christ in this way, we do so no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them. And he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. Jesus is saying, look, I'm here to break you from these worldly traditions that you have and these worldly things that you feel like you need to do in order to be full, in order for you to make it to heaven. You feel like you have to do these things out of obligation, and I'm here to break you from that mindset. I've come to have this new set of clothes for you to put on, not to patch up your old self, but to make that self 100% new. I've come to break the tradition of you hating your enemies. I've come to break the tradition of you holding things against other people because you feel like you're better and you have more pride. I've come to break the tradition of you looking in the mirror and hating the person that's looking back because you feel worthless. I've come to break the tradition of you trying to hurt yourself because you feel like that's the only way I can feel something, and if I just do this, maybe my emotions will come back. Because a new set of clothes that I have that's full of love for other people, that's full of love for yourself, that's full of love for me. And so when you look in the mirror, you don't see yourself, you see me looking back at you with this biggest smile on my face. I want you to put this new set of clothes on. This new set of that I have is not going to patch up your old life. And trust me when I say this, when you put this new set of clothes on, no one's going to be like, man, I wish I had that torn stuff. I wish I had that life where I looked in the mirror and I didn't like myself. I wish I had that life where I just hated people all the time. Jesus is saying, I haven't come to fix the sign that sits outside the church that says, hey, come find Jesus here. But I've come to give you a new sign that says Jesus is in you and he's open to everyone around you. So this is your next fill in the blank. Jesus has come with a new system. Jesus has come with a new system, a new set of clothes, a new sign, a new way of life for us to live in him. And remember, the Pharisees don't like this. Because at this time, if you were a religious leader, you held almost more power than the people who were actually in power, because the people who were over it all, they would go to the religious leaders and say, hey, do we have permission to do this? Hey, would this be wrong? Is this against God's will? And the Pharisees were like, yes, it is. Then they wouldn't do it. So the Pharisees, they don't like this. They get their power and their money and control over these places that people live. And then this Jesus guy comes in and he makes them look silly because he's like, this is, the way you guys are doing this is dumb. Do something different. And they obviously don't like this. They feel like Jesus is undercutting who they are, and they don't want that because they want to stay in power. And so they're on the lookout. How can we get Jesus to slip up? And that's where we get this next chapter. And I want to point something out. At the very end, in verse 11, it says they began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus. This is the beginning of the Pharisees plotting against Jesus. And so let's read chapter 6, verses 1 through 11. It says, "One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples began to pick some heads of grain, rub them in their hands, and eat the kernels. Some of the Pharisees asked, 'Why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?' Jesus answered them, 'Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, taking the consecrated bread. He ate what is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions.' Then Jesus said to them, 'The Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath.' On another Sabbath, he went into the synagogue and he was teaching. And a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus knew what they were thinking and said to the man with the shriveled hand, 'Get up and stand in front of everyone.' So he got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, 'I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to destroy it?' He looked around at them all and then said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' So he did so, and his hand was completely restored. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were furious and began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus. So the Pharisees and the disciples are walking along this road, and the disciples grab some heads of grain and they begin to eat it. And so to clear things up, this is not stealing. They're not robbing some farmers' crops or anything like that. What they would do is they would have their field, and they would only sow in like the middle of the field. So the edges of the field would have crops all around it. So that if there was a hungry traveler or there was someone who was poor and couldn't afford food, they could go by and they could take food from this field. It was called gleaning. And we see this in Leviticus 19 as a law. It says, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. So they're walking along this road, and this farmer does what he's called to do. So there's food on the side of the road, and they grab some kernels, rub it through their hands, and they eat it. And remember, the Pharisees are trying to find a way to disprove Jesus, and they find these guys. They're getting food, and they're eating on the Sabbath, which is unlawful to do. And so they get mad at them and say, hey, you're doing something that's unlawful on the Sabbath. You're breaking this tradition. What are you guys doing? Like, this isn't just like, oh, we have this tradition. You're breaking the law. Why are you doing this? And Jesus replies, and he ends it with, the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And this is a direct claim by Jesus saying, I am God. I will determine what is unlawful on the Sabbath. Not the religious leaders, but God himself will decide. Because there's this elaborate list of do's and don'ts on the Sabbath. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can't do. And in this moment, the disciples are found guilty of breaking 4 laws. Reaping food, threshing it, which is like separating it, winnowing it, which is like preparing it in their hands, and then eating it. So there's 4 laws that they break. And you're not allowed to work on the Sabbath, and this actually still happens today in some religions. There's these super tight rules on what you can and can't do on the Sabbath. And in 1992, there was a community that had 3 apartments burned down to the ground because there was a fire in one of them, and they called their rabbi and they said, hey, they went to the synagogue. They said, hey, there's a fire happening in this apartment. Is it breaking the Sabbath laws if we call the fire department? And the rabbi said, yes, it is, because making the phone call, you would break an electrical current, which is considered work. So if you go and you call the fire department, it will be breaking this law. And so because of that, 3 apartments burned down. This is something that is still happening today. And it's not saying that to like shame anyone like that, but if you're curious, like, oh, this is something that only happened back then, these rules still happen in different religions today. And so we see this man, right, and he has a shriveled hand, and Jesus is going to go and he's going to heal him. This, of course, is breaking the Sabbath. He's going to heal. He's going to perform this healing. And so the Pharisees, being the Pharisees, do what the Pharisees are good at in the Bible, and they try and call him out on it. And Jesus knows this, being Jesus, knows that they're trying to catch him out. And so he pushes back. And he says, all right, so tell me this. Which is unlawful, to do good or to do evil? Me saving a life or destroying it, you get to choose. Because either you're going to say, well, you destroy a life is fine. And that's going to kind of catch them in a little bit of an issue. See, he's saying, you're getting so caught up in what I should and I shouldn't do. You're getting so caught up in what's lawful and unlawful that this man who needs healing is not going to receive healing because you're so worried about these traditions that you're not going to show love to this guy. They see this joy and this kindness that Jesus has, and the Pharisees hate it. They hate that Jesus wasn't following these traditions. They hate that Jesus wasn't falling in temptation. They hate that Jesus wasn't falling into sin. And so they begin to discuss, what can we do to him? How can we get this guy out of here? Fast forward a few chapters, Jesus is eventually crucified. But here's the deal. Sometimes we get so caught up in the what do I have to do in order to make it to heaven? What is the minimum requirement of what I have to do to get to heaven? We get so caught up in the traditions of what we feel like we need to do and what we need to not do in order to make it to heaven, that we forget about loving and caring for the people that are around us. We get so caught up in making sure Sundays are our rest day that we're not willing to go out and talk to people. We're not willing to share the gospel because, well, today's my rest day. Let's just say I was sitting at Chipotle over here one day and someone walked up and was like, hey, I've seen that you're, a pastor over at First Baptist. I just got some questions about God. I'd love to sit and chat with you. And then I were to look at them and respond and be like, hey man, look, I would love to talk to you about the gospel, but today's my rest day, so not today. Right? Like that, like you laugh because you'd be like, no, dude, like if someone clear as day walked up to me and was like, tell me about the gospel, and I said no because I was on my rest day, you would be like, let's get a new guy up here. That guy is insane. Right? But I would be so focused on the tradition that I would be missing an opportunity to share the love of Jesus with this guy. Or maybe it's not that clear as day. You're hanging out with your friends on a Sunday, and someone's like, man, I've been thinking about going to church. You're just like, yeah, that'd be cool. And like you keep doing whatever you're doing, but taking opportunities as God presents them and not focused on, well, today's my rest day. If I did that, I would have missed the point of Jesus. I would have missed the whole reason he came and set his ministry. I've missed the heart of who Christ is. God has come to remove these barriers between us and him. And he's saying that if these traditions are acting as a barrier to you, I want you to get rid of them. If there's anything that's standing in the way of you or me, I want you to get rid of it. Because remember, I have a new set of clothes and I want you to come and get them. When we get to heaven, Jesus is not going to look at us and say, well, did you keep all the traditions that I laid out to you? Remember that guy that came up to you in Chipotle? Did you tell him no? No. When we get to heaven, the first thing he's going to do is give us a hug. He's going to say, I love you. Well done, my good and faithful servant. The first thing he's going to do is love us. And keep in mind, these traditions are different than growing in our faith with Jesus. So things like reading our Bible, right, coming to church, growing in him, being a part of a community, prayer, don't fall into traditions. They're opportunities for us to grow closer to Jesus. So this isn't saying, well, just believe in Jesus and that's all you have to do. There's still things that we should do to get closer to him. But things like fasting, things like the Sabbath, these things are traditions. And while we should be doing them to get closer to God, they're not a requirement. He's removing the barrier of the have to into the I get to. And so this is going to be your last fill in the blank. Jesus changes have to into get to. Jesus changes have to into I get to. And so while all these things are good, right, what I don't want to be taken away is like, oh, I'm not going to do any of these things. These things are all good. And if this is something is interest to you, let's chat about like what does fasting look like? Cool. What does Sabbath look like? Cool. Like let's talk about it. But by no means am I saying, all right, look, if any of you eat anything before the sun goes down, which is now 7 o'clock, by the way, that you are in sin and that you're breaking these laws and all this stuff, that's not what's being said. We are called to be disciples of Jesus. Jesus didn't come down to this earth
to set his ministry up and to eventually die on a cross to ensure that we wouldn't get caught up in these traditions that could potentially separate us from him because we feel like we have to do something. And so we've missed a point of the relationship entirely. He's come to break these traditions. He's come to do it so we can focus solely on the relationship with him and how can I get closer to you? Jesus came and died on a cross so that we could have a relationship with him. He came and died on a cross so that these barriers could be removed from us. Jesus died on the cross to fulfill the laws and prophets so that we don't have to don't get caught up in the weeds of, well, what does being a disciple look like? But we get to focus purely on a relationship with him. We get to focus on his love and his peace and his mercy. We get to focus on gratitude and meditating on his word and not feeling like we're forced to do something that we don't want to do, but focus purely on something that we want to do because we want it to grow our relationship. So as we leave here today, I challenge you to focus on the relationship of Jesus. How can I grow in my relationship? And not, well, what are the things, what's the minimum requirement? How do I get into heaven? No, it's how do I grow in my relationship with Jesus? Because if you're trying to find the checklist, how do I make it to heaven? It's by relationship. It's not with all of this other stuff. It's growing closer to him every day. And if you're like, well, how do I grow in a relationship? Let's go have a conversation. Let's chat about it. And I challenge you to change your mindset and to, what do I get to do for Jesus? And not, what do I have to do for Jesus? I want us to focus on, not what I have to do, but no, what do I get to do for Jesus? Not because I feel like I have to, but because I want to grow and I want to know who he is. And not looking at things like the Bible and prayer and church as something that I have to do, but something that I get to do because I'm going to be in community with people who believe in him as well. I get to spend quiet time with him and spend time with him. And then I get to go and learn about him and learn how I can live to be a disciple and show your love and your relationship to everyone around me. I challenge to say, how can I grow in him? So I'm going to pray and then we'll hang out. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, Lord. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for coming down and changing the game and making it so that we have to live lives of not I have to, but it's an I get to. Not I have to do these things, but now I get to because I love you and I want to have a relationship with you and you want to have a relationship with me. Lord, I pray this week you can give us opportunities to grow in you. And we can look at those opportunities as not as something that is forced or something that is required, but as something as an opportunity to grow in who you are, Lord. Not getting caught up in the weeds of how do I make it to heaven, but focused on, man, I can't wait to have the relationship with you and see you in heaven, Heavenly Father. I pray that as we leave here, we can do these things not to glorify ourselves as the best disciple, but to glorify you as a loving Father, as we run to you with arms wide open, so that we can continue to be lights for you as we build your kingdom, not to glorify this church or anything else, but to glorify you, Heavenly Father. So we love you and we praise you, and in your name, amen. All right, connection cards over on in that box. We started with a new song today.